My name is McIntyre. Thank you for coming to the last talk of DerbyCon 2.0. Hope everybody had a great time. I know I did. So I am here to talk about some work that we have been doing with smart meters. So first of all, it's a little bit about me. My name is McIntyre. I'm a consultant and on the research and innovation team of SecureState. So I do a lot of the profiling work, so attack and penetration, things like that. But I also do a lot of special projects, which is where all of the work that I'm presenting today has come from. So special projects when we were approached by clients from the energy companies and we needed to do assessment on smart meters and the security of those devices. So I do a lot of tool development, right, in Python, Ruby, stuff like that, committed stuff to Metasploit, and this is one of my open source projects is the one that we're going to be focusing on today. So, all right, so the agenda, really quick and simple. We're going to cover backgrounds of smart meters for just a little bit, and then we'll go right into talking about attacking them. Specifically, we're going to talk about attacking them over the optical interface. And finally, we're going to give a little bit of the background about the image that we have right there and go over why would someone want to attack smart meter and specifically how we're going to do it. So first off, background. As a whole on the large picture, smart meters play a key role in advanced metering infrastructure, which is that AMI buzzword that goes around. So that's the infrastructure that is being used to automatically read people's and businesses' gas, electrical, and water usage. So instead of somebody having to have to come around to your house to take the readings off of the meters and to reconfigure them and so forth, we have building out the infrastructure or the advanced metering infrastructure that will allow these values to be automatically read and for meters to do advanced things like charge users based on times of day, so time of use billing, things like that. So the meters can change and adapt based on how the electrical companies and the service providers being the gas, water, electrical industries, need them to react. So they can change things based on the seasons or based on time of day, things like that. So the really key factor with smart meters is that they allow two-way communication. Smart meters can report data back to the service providers, and the service providers can communicate back to the smart meters. So when they're communicating back to the service providers, typically what they're doing most time is reporting information usage. So where am I? Okay. And so when the service providers are communicating back to the smart meters, sometimes it's to do reconfiguration changes, things of that nature. So smart meters are a component in the smart grid. I just want to make that clear. So we're not going to talk about the smart grid as a whole. There's a bunch of research out there that has already been done on that. InGuardians has done a lot of really good work on that. They have a bunch of white papers about the smart grid as a whole. But what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the very, very small part of just the meters themselves, the physical meters and their communications. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit of background. Why would anybody be interested in this type of thing is the number one reason that comes to mind is fraud. That's actually a large problem is that people can steal electricity. So we have this picture right over here, and these devices over here are magnets. And on the very, very old electrical meters, there's a disc right in here, that slot right there, and it rotates around. And the idea behind this was the magnets would be on either side, and they would slow down the rotation of the disc, allowing the house to use more electricity than what was being reported, so they could run at whatever they wanted, and they would be billed less. So one of the estimates that I actually found was from USA Today, and they estimated there's about $6 billion in power is stolen each year. So that's just an estimation because, of course, they don't know because you can't really measure something that you're missing. So another key component here is that AMI is still an emerging technology. It's not around everywhere. I can tell personally I'm from the Cleveland area, so I can say that a lot of the newer residential areas that are currently being developed, a lot of them are being installed with smart meters. So they're going in right off the bat. Some of the older buildings are also being retrofitted with these new smart meters. So they're going into newer buildings and they're continuously being pushed out today. So it's definitely an emerging technology. So why would we want to attack a smart meter as opposed to the electrical company themselves, the service providers? It's a really interesting question, but what it comes down to is the same two reasons why we really want to attack anything. We either want access to the information, or so to be able to control the information, in this case the billing information being priority, or we want the access to the device itself. And what I mean by the access the device has is sometimes the certain smart meters are retrofit or fitted with a cellular connection that they can communicate back to the service provider, so they can communicate their information that way. So they'll be on a sort of VPN type network. Well, they can communicate directly to internal resources of the service provider. So if you want to get access into that, attacking the smart meter is going to be one of the better ways to do it. And all of this is a very large concern because we all have access to these devices. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them out there being deployed. They're on commercial buildings, residential buildings. People have access to these, and you can't monitor that many devices. As we all know, when someone has physical access to something, it's only a matter of time before they can really do whatever it is that they need. So there are anti-tamper mechanisms in place, but they're not highly effective. And so we're going to look at that just a little bit. All right, so the information that the meters are storing, primarily what we're interested in is going to be usage information, although they also do store billing information. This is particularly the case when the meters are being used for time of use billing. So billing that allows the service providers to charge the consumer more money when the service is in higher use. For example, between the hours of 5 p.m. and midnight is typically when electricity is more expensive because everyone's coming home, turning on their TVs, things of that nature. So one of the concerns for consumers or even corporations is that the usage can be profiled. I was reading some information on some white papers that were released about companies being concerned about being profiled through their electrical usage because it was hypothesized that attackers could tell if they were working on new research, if they were going to produce a new product because their electrical usage was spiking in the months prior to a release. So by being able to tell when the electricity is being used and how much it is and profile it over a long period of time, that people can get an idea of what's going on the inside, what's using that power. So this is all information that's being stored on the electrical meters, or on the meters themselves. All right, so different types of access that the meters have. Like I mentioned, some meters have cellular connections. This is not the case for all the meters, but some of them do have cellular connections. So they'll have SIM cards in the actual meter that allows them to be on a sort of private network with the service providers that they can communicate their information back. Now, these SIM cards are just like the normal SIM cards that we have, where it requires a APN, a username, and a password. So I've heard about these being given direct access onto the internet, which is kind of scary because the meters will just have a public address. I haven't seen that, but I've heard about cases where that has happened. But what I've actually seen in the cases with some of our clients is that they'll be on a private network as assigned by Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, some type of intermediate service provider that's allowing these smart meters to utilize their data connections to give access back to the service providers to report their information. All right, so this is one of the smart meters that we have actually physically opened up. So this white component right here is a component manufactured by Motorola. That's the actual cellular communication. That's actually where that's happening right there. So I can do this, and any attacker that has physical access to it can take their smart meter, take it off the wall, or do what they need to do to open it up to get access into this. This was not that difficult. There were no anti-tamper screws, anything like that. I think I did this with needle nose pliers. I don't even think I had to have a screwdriver in order to get this to work. Pretty much, it was just the needle nose pliers. Now, at one point when we had been doing this work for our clients, the client was concerned about us being able to access their internal resources over this SIM card. So we did have the SIM card. We obtained it out of the smart meter, and the only thing that was stopping us from gaining access into their internal network was the APN. The username and password were not set, so those values, it's possible that they may not be set. The APN should be considered secret, but it's not a password, so people aren't typically going to keep it secret. We were given the value, and after having done so, I did a lot of research on the internet to try to see if an attacker would be able to find the value somehow, and I couldn't find anything that implied that an attacker would be able to reproduce this without already knowing it. So that APN really is the only thing that's really preventing someone from taking out the SIM card, putting it into the laptop, and getting access to the internal network.
What is it?
Which can be kind of concerning because they have immediate access to everything. This case in particular, once we had the APN and we were able to connect to the internal network, we were actually able to exploit a very common flaw on one of their web servers and get system level access to that server. So we were able to show that to the client, and we were able to explain to them that really the only thing that would have stopped us as a real attacker is not knowing that APN.
What is the APN again?
The APN is a value that is provided by the cellular service providers such as AT&T, Verizon, and I don't know the specifics about it, but to me it looks like fully qualified domain name.
Okay.
But the domain name has nothing to do with the client. It was something.verizon.com or .sprint.com, .att.com. It's provided from the cellular service provider.
That basically sets up the virtual private, like the private network,
Right.
not encrypted, but like getting you onto that segment of their network that only those devices should have access to.
Oh, okay.
So APN is unique to the network, not individual SIM card.
Yes, yes. Multiple SIM cards are all going to be utilizing the same APN. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about how people can access the meters. So there are basically the wireless interfaces that they use. There's also a sub-gigahertz radio in use by some meters. This is variants by manufacturers. So different manufacturers are going to utilize different technologies. Some of them are going to be using Zigbee. Some of them, like I said, are going to be using the sub-gigahertz radio. Some will be having cell cards added on. And all of the meters that I've seen all have a optical interface, which is what we're going to focus on for the remainder of this talk. And it's also important to know that a lot of these can be used in conjunction with themselves. The meters that I've seen from our clients have used Zigbee radios with cellular connections in them, as well as they have the optical interface. So in case the network communication is broken, a technician can go out and actually hook up to the optical interface in order to access the meter. So,
Is the optical
All right.
interface such that you could do something from a distance using a laser, or are they?
as far as the optical probe,
Yeah.
I haven't heard of anybody actually being able to get that to successfully work from any substantial difference. The laser or the optical interface is all infrared, and it's, to my understanding by reading the documentation about the cable itself, it's not really designed to be a remote administrative solution. On the flip side though, if you are trying to access a meter remotely, I know they do make wireless cables, if that makes sense, where it's essentially two components, where you have one, you put it onto the meter, and then it interfaces with your laptop over Bluetooth, and you have a Bluetooth dongle, so you can work on the meter from in your car while it's raining or something
Right.
like that.
You would need physical access to the meter to do that. I was just thinking of the somebody with a laser or other coherent light, they could do it from a distance, from the street, being able to hit the meter interface.
No, you do need to get out and walk over to the meter to be able to touch it. All right, so like we were just talking about, the optical interface over the meters uses a ANSI Type 2 optical port. Now, this is a port that has two infrared diodes on it. One is for transmissions and one is for receiving. So anybody can purchase a cable to interface with this type of port. They're not restricted in any way, shape, or form. They're a little bit expensive, around $400 to $500 range, but you can buy them off of Amazon. I have read about people being able to make them themselves, and there's a couple of documents out there for parts that I want to say around like $50, but no one has let me know yet if those will actually work with my software, or how successful they've actually been with those. So once the connection is actually made, the physical connection, the standards that are in use here have nothing to do with TCP/IP. It's not the standard types of communications that are used for inter-network systems. The communications that are actually being used is going to be the C1218, which is going to define the methods of actually accessing the data, so transmitting and receiving, command and control type of things. And then the C1219 is going to specify the format in which the data is actually in at rest. So while it's being stored within the tables on the meter itself or as given back. So C1218 will sometimes encapsulate the C1219 information as that information is being read and written to the various tables on the meter itself. All right, so a little bit of background on C1219. Like I said, this is the standard that is specifying how the data is actually formatted. So The tables are broken out into decades. So 0 through 9 is going to be the general configuration that's going to have information about the device itself, the manufacturer, the name, the serial number, various configuration information such as whether or not it's using big or little endian, software version, things like that. The security tables, 40 through 49, have the access permissions for each one of the tables. So there's no concept of files on the smart meter. All the information is being stored in tables. And these tables are all uniquely identified by their ID number, which is what we have right here. So each one of the tables has access permissions on it that are very similar to files, where there's read and write for the different levels of users that are on the device. There is no execute, but there is read and write controls. So there's unauthenticated users and then full up to administrative users. And then some of the other interesting tables is that there's the history and event logs, which will store things such as procedures that have been run, anything that's happened to the meter if it's been opened up. Some of them will throw a tamper alarm, so they'll log itself into the meter. And then there's also telephone and modem control tables, which control numbers that can be programmed into the meter to have them call back to report information over C1221 protocol. So there's a lot more decades of tables, and those are all defined in the C1219 standard. But these are the ones that are primarily interested to us as security vendors, or security.
And whose standard is that? Is that ANSI?
Sorry, what was that?
The C12 standard, is that an ANSI
Yes,
standard?
yes it is. As an ANSI standard that you can purchase, I think it's like a few $100s, but it's an open standard.
Okay.
All right, so this right here is the optical port that I was just mentioning. So if you can see right there, it's a little dividing line. So there's the transmitting and the receiving diodes that are in there. So this is one of the smart meters. This is actually one of the ones in the wild. This is not one of the ones that we've worked with. But so like I was saying, optical probe's about $500, and then that is what we're looking at. So it's that optical interface in there that we're actually talking about using. All right, so prior to doing any of the work for the vendors that have worked with us, we haven't really found any open source tools that can do security assessments on the meters. The only tools that are really out there are for administration of the meters themselves, and those are distributed by the manufacturers. The manufacturers being GE, Landis+Gyr, companies like that that are actually making the physical hardware for the meters themselves. And then the service providers, the gas and electric companies, are then utilizing this software from the vendors to manage the meters. So we created the open source framework Terminator. I wrote all of it, and we have released it on Google Code. So it implements a C1218 stack, so we can do communications with the meter and not be hindered by what the manufacturer enables us to do. So we can do things like read and write raw values to the various tables, any of the tables that we want. We can brute force logins, we can run procedures, we can do pretty much anything that we want. It's modeled after the Metasploit framework. I am a very large Metasploit fan, and I don't like learning how to use new interfaces, and I think most of us here can agree with that. Don't fix what's not broken. So it's just like Metasploit, the concept and modules are on there, a lot of the same core commands are still going to work in Terminator. It's all written in Python. Like I said, it implements a full C1218 stack and a partial C1219 library. So partial meaning that it will focus on the decades that I pointed out that are of particular interest right now. So the general configuration tables can all be processed. The security access tables can all be processed, enumerated, things like that. So and it's open source, and you can download it today at code.google.com/Terminator. So current things that we can do with it is it interacts with the meters over a serial connection to the optical cable itself. We have 12 core modules in it right now, and like I said, we have the ability to brute force logins. We have the ability to enumerate out what tables we can read and write to. We can dump tables to text files. We can do offline analysis of them, so we can, after we dump the information, we can check to see if things have changed after procedures, things like that. We can run procedures with raw values, so the raw parameters that are going into that. Something that's important to note, though, is like I was talking about the tables, everything on the meter is all in tables. If you want to log in, you are you are sending information via the C1218 protocol, but then that is being validated against the security tables in the device. The passwords are all being stored in the tables. When you want to run a procedure, you write to the procedure initiation table, you set your parameters and your values, and then you read the response out of the procedure response table, things like that. So everything is all in tables. So Terminator gives you the access to, you can either have a little bit more high level control if you want to run procedures and pass in raw values, or you can have really low level access and just write the raw values that you want into whatever tables. All right, so this is the one of the basic modules that comes with the Terminator. So we can see right up in here we have the mode that meter is in right now, so it's in metering mode. So that will, in the demonstration, will show how that dictates some of the access that the user can have on the device itself. We also have the hardware version of the meter. We have the device type right there. It says electric because we're using an electric meter. Some alternatives is we could have a gas or water meter in that value right there. We have the serial number, firmware version, so the software that's on the device, and the device ID. In this case, the device ID and the serial number are the same. However, the serial numbers are not writable, so users can't change them. Device ID, on the other hand, users can change the values of the device ID, which can be sometimes a concern for the service providers. It depends on if the service providers are using the device ID as the unique identifier for the meter. So for example, if I can brute force the meter, get access into it, I can change the device ID and imitate another user. So I can imitate my neighbor and make them have to pay for my electricity bill. We have the model, so right here we can see that we're working with a i210, and then we have the C1219 version. So this is this module right here, the get info module, is reading all of this information out of the general configuration decade of tables. That's the tables 0 through 9. I was talking about earlier. So the modules that are in the framework right now, like I said, there's about 12 of them. They're not quite script kiddie ready. You can't just load them up and then run them with any value you're choosing, because a lot of times they won't work quite that way. You still have to understand the nature of the data and format it properly for the most part. Certain modules like the module 2 run procedures will help you format the data so it's written to the procedure table. However, the data that goes into the procedure itself still has to be formatted properly. So if you want to use that, you're still going to have a fairly in-depth knowledge of the C1219 standards that formats the procedures that go into that table. All right, so we also have modules to automate certain common tasks. I'll demonstrate the one that can change the meter's ID and the meter's operating mode, which can be very useful for testing because certain things you have access to when the meter's operating mode is in different states. All right, so these are some of the security issues that we've been able to identify with Terminator. So some of the table values can be modified without properly authenticating. Now what we have found is that when the user submits a authentication request with a invalid password, that the meter will still authenticate the user and grant read and write access to certain tables. Typically, a lot of the tables will have read access, but you only have write access when you need to log into the device. So by attempting to log in with invalid credentials, you're still able to write to the device. This one right here, we can see that this is an issue in which the username values are all the same and the IDs are all the same. However, the password is different, so we can log in and authenticate to the smart meter with different passwords. So this is a concern as well. And also something to note, on the meters that I've seen, there is no lockout policy. So the brute force login module that I have right here will take about 90 minutes to run through all the values that ship with Terminator as default password values. Actually might be a little bit faster because I've modified some of them a little bit, but you can run through that and there is no lockout on the accounts. However, certain meters, if configured, will log those failed login attempts to the internal table. However, if you get access to the meter, you can go in and then clear out that table because you have access to it after that. So not very effective. You just need to ensure that you do that before that information is communicated back to the service provider. All right, next up. One other thing that we want to see here is before actually running the module, we have the use hex option is being set. That's because the passwords for the C1218 protocol are actually they're actually binary strings, so more equivalent to encryption keys because they're not limited to ASCII values. They always have to be the same size, but they're not limited to ASCII values, which makes it possible to have very, very strong passwords because you have a much larger character set. Of course, your character set is now 256 values for each byte as opposed to the normal ASCII values. So that's why you see this right here is by setting the use text option to true, we're specifying that our word list is presenting the passwords in hexadecimal format. So. All right, so I really wanted to bring in a live demonstration to do this, but the smart meters that we have back at the office are all 220 volt meters, so they won't plug into the wall outlets. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually bring in a physical meter because I really wanted to bring one in to be able to do a live demonstration. So I'm really sorry about that, but what I do have is a video of, that I created back at the office earlier this week about running through some of the modules with the meter.
How much do those meters actually cost?
Smart meters themselves, they range in different prices, depends on which one you want to get and what capabilities you have. You actually might be able to answer that a little bit better.
Yeah, generally, you're not going to be able to purchase a new smart meter straight up. You can't call up the vendor and purchase it unless you're a utility. There are ones that appear on eBay, but you have to be careful of that because most of the time when we found someone claiming they have a smart meter on eBay, it's not a smart meter, or when it arrives, it's broke. But if you do watch, we have successfully purchased 2 off of eBay that actually work. But generally, in those, you can $100 to $200. A new one though is going to be much more than that over the price range on it. But as an individual, actually acquiring one is going to be very difficult.
Well, I was just curious from a general perspective. I mean, because the utilities are saying they're deploying these things, are they deploying $1,000 items or $100 items? Was why I was curious.
I would say my guess would be there in the $1,000 range, but at the same time, a lot of them, there are also ones which the smart meter component is an add-in. So there's something that's actually added into an existing meter itself. So there can be some switches out there, and I also don't know off the top of my head what an actual kind of non-smart power meter costs as well.
Okay, so want to jump right into the demo. So Terminator has actually been included in Backtrack since R3. So we're running through Terminator right here, have it loaded up. We're setting the connection, so the serial connection, so it knows how to interface the device. Before you can run any of the modules, you have to, of course, connect the device. This is going to ensure that the device is responding and pull back, most importantly, the endian information out of the meter so it knows whether it needs to pack values in little big endian format. So as you can see right here, it's running through the modules, and a lot of the commands are the same, where you can use module show options, set options, just like in Metasploit. So it should be fairly intuitive for people that are used to using Metasploit. So after we've brute forced the password right there, it was conveniently set to all null, so it didn't take that long. We're running the get info so we can show the value of the meter's device ID. And then right on down here, we're actually setting the meter's device ID to DerbyCon. So that the video is a little bit flaky. I took it at a higher resolution so it'd actually be readable. But so right there, we can see that we were able to change the device ID to DerbyCon. So right here, we're setting the meter's mode. Before it was in metering, which is the standard operating mode for the meter. We're going to set it to test. This includes running a procedure in the background to modify the meter's mode. Once we have it in there, if you look at the 2 values of the get info information, we don't have access to as much information now that we're in the test mode. Furthermore, we're going to set the try to set the meter's mode again. And this time is going to fail because the meter is in a test mode, so it's not going to work. Because the data is locked, so that's the actual response back from the C1219 cables. And then now that the mode is back in metering, we're going to once again set the meter ID to value. This time this will work because the meter's mode is proper. So when you're going through and doing the test on the meters, it's useful to change the mode of the meter and then retry different things. Sometimes you'll have additional access depending on what mode the meter is in. And that's it. That. And all right, only got a couple more slides here. So in the future, we want to try to integrate into Zigbee, so stuff from the Killer Bee framework we're going to look into adding, support for character sets beyond just the 7-bit ASCII stuff, and additional modules, so pretty simple stuff that we want to add in. These are some of the meters that we were actually using. This was one of the ones that I had opened up in the office. And references, C12, 18, and 19 standards, those are open. You do have to pay for them, but they're publicly available. And that's it. Thank you very much. Sorry for keeping you guys late. Does anybody have any questions?
So with all the testing you've done, what's the thing that kind of scares you about having one of these on your house? What would be your biggest concern?
Somebody running the brute force module, clearing out the log table after that, changing my device ID to impersonate somebody else.
Can you do remote disconnect, or I guess the
Yes, that's one of the procedures. Sometimes that can be different depending on the manufacturer of the meter, but yes, you can do a remote disconnect if you're authenticated as an administrator on those meters. Yes.
What are the physical access controls that guard that port,
The optical port, there are no physical access controls at all.
Yeah, look at power meters. I've seen them all over the place. They're just right on the front.
There's quite a few around this area as well.
Yeah.
They're not like behind that glass bulbs or whatever.
No,
they're designed for protect
the plastic over it is just to protect the IO diode.
So I mean, what are I mean, it sounds like it's pretty easy to brute these things, log in and pass. I mean, what are chances of me going to my backyard and successfully logging in by brute force?
Based on the really weak passwords I've seen some people use, it's pretty good.
Pretty good.
And a lot of utilities have the same password set throughout their entire footprint.
Right, that was gonna be my question.
Yeah.
Right.
So it could be,
So you brute force yours, then your neighbor's probably gonna have the same credentials.
your neighbors will guarantee to have it.
Oh, I see.
I will basically say, in cases we've seen some utilities that break it up by like state is about the smallest they get down to.
Wow.
So I mean, when we're talking about utilities that are cross footprint, we're talking about like ones that. Yeah, I guarantee your neighbor would have the same one from what we've seen.
Not that surprising, actually.
Yeah. You have password management on that. I mean, these are designed for people to go up and be able to plug in and do stuff. So just, password management on that would be very difficult.
Do you have gauge on what
bring
OS
this up
they're
to,
Yeah.
sorry. Also, when we bring this up to the clients, a lot of times their reaction is, "Oh crap, we can't easily change that."
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it takes a firmware update, and depending on their infrastructure, they may not be able to remotely push out a firmware update in order to update the passwords.
Or have one person go around and change it.
Exactly. So that's not a trivial task when there's hundreds of thousands of them deployed. So
Wow.
a password compromise is actually a pretty big deal.
Functionality for security later, right? It's good.
Yeah, and the lifespan of a smart meter there, they expect these to be in the field for decades.
Yeah. Well, if they spend $1,000 or whatever.
I think they probably put $100 through the scales by a million meters.
Wow, that's great. Do you guys have a feel for what OS those things are running, or what process?
Oh, Terminator?
Oh, no, the smart meters themselves.
Oh.
Is it some real-time OS, or does it run it all?
It's just the firmware that's lit on by the manufacturer, so it's all
Oh, really?
ARM architecture, but it's not
Okay.
based on Linux or anything like that.
Got it. Cool.
Probably closer to Arduino than anything else. I mean, it's just straight up embedded processor with
Oh, I got you.
code running right on
It's
it.
not running like the X version.
No.
So it's a microcontroller.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just, it's an ARM processor. When you dump the firmware in it, it's all ARM, so you can reverse it.
Dump the firmware. Did you do that through this optical port or
No.
via JTAG?
Yeah.
So the JTAG port is it harder to get to, or?
Yeah, you have to open it up to get to it, but again, as you mentioned, I mean, the biggest thing is, actually removing it, like removing one in the field, the biggest thing is there's a tamper seal on it, so just replacing that tamper seal on it. But once you get inside, I mean, very few meters actually have any sort of tamper evidence, so like it's not like you open it up and it phones home that, hey, this meter was opened up. It's the next time a tech comes by, looks and sees like, hey, the collar was broken.
Yeah. And it happens when? But if you're a renter or if it's not your house.
Which is the whole point of the smart meter. They're never going to come and look at your meter.
Was something that struck me as I was saying that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, the whole point is they don't need to stop by unless something goes wrong. So they could stop by and be like, well, sometime in the past 10 years, someone messed with this.
Yeah, you're asking about physical security on the thing. It actually helps you. It's got a magnet on it with the cable too. It's kind of like a MacBook or something like have the cable, power cable snapped in. It's how it is on that thing. It actually locks on there.
Yeah, there's a big metal
Yeah.
chunk
Yeah.
that literally just like it's a big magnet that sticks to it.
You could be more worried about the 220 volts than it would be
Yeah.
seals or.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
that's
that's
where
where
you
you crack it, and yeah, you would most likely want to take the power, like, yeah, turn off the power to your house before you did that.
Yeah, so without cracking.
Right.
This is outside my utility closet, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is
This is on the outside of your house.
so
Yeah,
how
there
do you
should
shut
be
the
a
power
shut
off?
off there.
That shuts the power off inside.
No, I actually need to look at that.
It's a lock.
Needless to say, we've not actually experimented with taking meters off of flat houses.
I have one in my house, and every day I'm just like, stroking my chin.
We have learned more about how to read power meters and the different socket types, how to power them. I now know more about electrical meters, like the physical side of them, than I ever expected to. Because it's not just as easy as like plug in the power and go.
Yeah, so now it is like $400 or $500 for one of those cables. Right around
That's the big stuff.
Yeah, I got a couple friends pitching.
Yeah, well,